so much about this is not about them. I think that in this conversation, the cliche is sort of like, oh, the big bad in-laws. And that can't always be the case, or else we would all be having terrible parents. I mean, just statistically, it doesn't make sense that all in-laws can be bad. But it really is, it's about our expectations. It's about us navigating our own, losses. We are also gaining this new family. So I think keeping that in mind throughout all of this, it's you, it's your stuff to navigate. Yes, they might have their thing. There might be some quirks. But really so much of this is stuff that can be planned for, navigated together. And it's all about how the couple does this together.
Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. At least at the time of this recording, it is a beautiful Friday afternoon in Dallas. I'm very excited today because I'm joined with a colleague and a lovely human, Katie Hevia. Thank you for being here. Tell us a little bit about you for those that are listening and may not know who you are just yet.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Liz. I'm excited to be here. So I am a licensed marriage and family therapist associate and also dually licensed as a licensed professional counselor associate. So that's a mouthful. But I am one of the therapists at MLC, and I work with a lot of couples, and I also work with a lot of adult individuals. But I find myself working with a lot of couples who are in the early stages of their relationship, whether that be dating, committed long-term, but not necessarily interested in getting married, engaged, or recently married. And recently married can be anything from totally newlyweds to married for the past 5 years. So I love working with that population. I think there's a lot of upside to working with people who are very early in their relationship, because you can kind of lay the foundation for a really solid start for hopefully a really long relationship together. And in that population, there's a topic that comes up a lot that I'm really excited to talk to you about today, which is navigating new family dynamics. And what I mean by that is figuring out how to deal with in-laws. So as you can imagine, that's a lot of people.
I'm just kidding. We love in-laws here. But yeah, dynamics for sure. Well, and we talked before this about curveball questions, and I was just curious to ask, when you were introducing yourself, like, did you always know that you were interested in working with this population of clients and, some of these like preemptive times in their life, like premarital and kind of preparing for these life transitions down the road?
Yeah, I knew I wanted to work with couples. I didn't realize how much I would love working with couples at this stage in the game. I think it's really heartwarming to see couples who are being really proactive about their relationship and just getting into therapy as soon as they can. So that's something that I've really loved about it.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. We talked a little bit about that in another podcast episode with our whole team, just how really generationally too, I think a lot of our clients are breaking that barrier of not waiting until everything's hitting the fan to come into therapy. And so that's really cool. You're seeing some really neat change and transformation happen before things get really tough. They can build on those strengths. Well, yes, the topic of in-laws, I think this is such a relevant one. And maybe we can just start that out with exploring, like, are there any surprises about navigating new family dynamics once people are married or in a committed partnership that catch people off guard?
Yeah, so I love that question because I do see a couple of surprises that come up often with recently married or just recently committed partners that I don't think a lot of people expect. So one of them is that, and I should say this is a general surprise. It doesn't necessarily happen to everyone, but it's something that I've seen quite often with couples in therapy, is that they find themselves almost mourning the loss of this extended family that they expected. So a lot of people, they think a lot about what they imagine their family is going to be when they get married one day, maybe as early as when they're kids. they're thinking about, what dynamics they're expecting with their in-laws, what they're hoping their relationship to be like with them. And that can come from what they see within their own family that they really love and want to replicate at some point in their lives, or stuff within their own family that they don't love and they definitely want to avoid having happen. So I think what can catch people off guard is that sometimes, even if they meet their in-laws before they get married or before they're fully committed and they have an idea of who they are, sometimes that expectation versus reality can kind of catch them off guard once they start to spend more time with them and become more integrated with that family. So there really is some grief in losing that idea of what they thought that their family might look like.
Yeah. And I'm just glad you kind of started with all that, because we could probably dive into a lot of meaningful, but more like surface level pieces around in-laws and kind of the transition. But really, you're talking about that deeper level stuff that catches people by surprise a little bit. And I don't know, I just wonder sometimes where the myth or that expectation came from that like positivity / lack of pain means something is good and is right, when really, like what you're describing, as we kind of know as therapists who study developmental, aspects of relationships, we know that it's normal. It's really normal to feel what you're describing there, I think, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And when you said that about positivity and lack of pain kind of being this expectation or gold standard, I mean, think about how it is within your own family. Who is in a family where there is just positivity all the time? And I think we almost put unfair expectations on the family that we grow into, marry into, commit into, that things should look great, should be as perfect as possible. And that's just never how families are. So that's a tough one
Yeah,
for
yeah.
people. That can really catch them off guard. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and I would also like to add to that. So another surprise that we see is this kind of like, and again, it's another form of grief, and it's grieving the loss of time with your own family. So we don't always think about it this way, but when you grow your family, when you add to your family, and you are now part of this whole new extended family, you're also losing some time, traditions, and just things that you love to do with your own family, because naturally we only have so much time. You have to balance it. So that can feel like a shock. I find that a lot of couples just at the beginning of figuring out navigating holidays or other big traditions, there's just this real pain and sense of grief in realizing that you're going to have to share now, right? Like it's not going to be all about your family and the things that you love to do with them, but now you need to share that with your partner. So that's a
Yeah.
huge one.
Yeah.
And couples really, I don't think a lot of people know how to even talk about that in advance or know to expect it.
Yeah. And I was just wondering, I'm wanting to ask you, do you hear couples like in premarital therapy talking about those kinds of things? Because it really is like one thing to kind of talk all that out. And then it's this whole other thing to live through it and experience it and really feel that separation of, wow, I'm losing this time. And, that felt sense of loss or whatever. But do you hear them kind of identify that as something they want to talk about and try to understand more?
Yes. Well, premarital couples are kind of a special group because they are being very proactive. In fact, they're not necessarily coming into
Mm-hmm.
therapy with a presenting concern or problem. And so it's all about trying to plan for the unexpected. So they really get a head
Yeah.
start on a lot of those conversations, where I find couples that are sort of like navigating it as it happens or after it's happening are just couples who are in therapy in general. And also, I mean, couples who aren't in therapy. I see this with my friends. I see this, I've experienced this myself, that you might not
Mm-hmm.
know to plan for it. And then how can you sort of be prepared for that as it comes?
Yeah, I was just thinking about myself as you were talking, and it's like, like I'm a therapist. I try to be pretty self-aware about the areas where I'm going to struggle and stuff, but I had like this memory in my body of like feeling nervousness just about like what's it going to be like our lives, especially when kids came along. It was like,
Yeah.
the time really is going to be split, and I'm nervous about how much I'm going to lose because my family was really close knit and stuff like that. But that was just purely based on like fears and anxieties more than them being like difficult people. Like it wasn't like
Yeah.
that. You know what I mean? So much can
Yes.
color where that's coming from for people, I'm sure.
And I think that's really important to bring up because so much about this is not about them. I think that in this conversation, the cliche
Yeah.
is sort of like, oh, the big bad in-laws. And that can't always be the case, or else we would all be having terrible parents. I mean, just statistically, it doesn't make sense that all in-laws can be bad. But it really is, it's about our expectations. It's about us navigating our own, loss as we are also gaining this new family. So I think keeping that in mind throughout all of this, and I'm going to bring that up a lot today, just keeping in mind, it's you, it's your stuff to navigate. Yes, they might have their thing. There might be some quirks. But really so much of this is stuff that can be planned for, navigated together, and it's all about how the couple does this together.
Yeah. Which really, in what you just said, I hear a lot of empowerment and hope too. Because it's not like no, you're the problem. It's like, no, you actually kind of can hold the reins on how you feel through all of this and the adjustments.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
You had mentioned that, couples are kind of like might mourn that those family dynamics are different than expected. Couples can mourn the family dynamics that they expected but didn't get. How can couples identify and grieve those losses together, instead of feeling like it's something that's maybe pulling them apart or feeling some unspoken disappointments or resentments?
Yeah. And that's a nice question following up what we were just talking about, because like you said, Liz, like you started to realize that you had some feelings around balancing your parents' time with your in-laws when you were having kids. And it's something that you had to really think through and process and become aware of. So I think for a lot of people, the first step here is really having that introspection and just acknowledging, okay, this is what's happening. This is me starting to feel a type of way about this. And what happens more often than not is that one partner will feel this loss and disappointment that we're talking about, but it might initially just manifest as irritation about their partner's family. It becomes about them instead of about me. And that makes it really difficult for the other partner to know how to support and empathize and show up for their partner, because that kind of automatically puts them on the defense if they feel like their partner is saying, I just don't like them. I just don't like how they are about this, because that sort of puts that partner in the position of, well, I don't know how to do and what to do about that, because they are who they are and they're my family. So again, first and foremost, it's really having that introspection and figuring out how to articulate that to your partner, that it's about you and not about them. And that could be something as simple as, I really wish I was closer to your mom. I wish your mom and I had a better relationship, whatever it is. And then that's something that you can discuss and decide, okay, is this attainable if we just have a conversation with them, if we change the way that we interact with them, or are we going to have to adjust our expectations a little bit and figure out how to navigate this in a way that makes sense for our relationship and our family union?
I'm thinking too about how what you sort of role played there, that people could say to their partner to make it less of a situation where the defenses and activation kind of gets riled up. But I do think to an extent, like for many people out there, like that's a skill to like communicate in that way. And I'm wondering, like, is that something you find yourself helping couples learn how to do in therapy? Like kind of like how to identify, like, yeah. Can you say a little bit about that? Because it's almost like the relationship 101 stuff. I mean, I guess what I'm searching for here is like, it's true, right? Like not everybody just knows how to do that. We really have to kind of learn.
Yeah. And I'm glad you grounded us in that reality, because what I just said was so much easier said than done. And the truth is that that's not how those conversations go a lot of times. And one person usually is kind of stuck in their feelings and not knowing how to express it. And the other one is receiving some version of that that's not necessarily the root of how that person feels, but it might be something that
Right.
comes off as kind of hurtful or judgmental when it's not really meant to be. So, yes, I would say,
Hmm.
and when there are those difficulties and a partner, couple might find themselves in a cycle, that's where therapy can definitely help.
I just love that.
Yeah.
That's why we became therapists, right? So we could get all this right for ourselves.
Yeah. We're
And
still
that's only
trying.
10% true. So, yeah, I mean, okay, so say that the conversation doesn't go so well and they need a little help in therapy. What might be some of those common dynamics that couples want your help with when it comes to navigating things with the in-laws?
Yeah. So, in addition to just having those conversations, like we were saying before, I think a lot of those sort of like expectations versus reality issues are often
Mm.
related to navigating new family rules, new family roles, and new family values. And I'm getting very family therapist systemic on us right now, but
Love
these
it.
are things that exist with every family, right? And joining a new family is almost like learning a new language. Like you are starting from scratch. Even if you and your partner look like you are from the same background culturally, you assume you're sort of similar on paper. There are so many nuances to how families interact with each other, whether it be in how they talk to each other, how they
Mhm.
show love for each other, and also just what are those family rules that they might all follow. And I want to be clear about family rules because when I say that, I kind of picture like one of those like beach house rules sign, like don't like go into the pool, don't bring sand into the house, like something very clear cut.
Yeah,
But that is not what I'm talking about. These are more
because
often than not.
rarely are they ever actually written anywhere.
Yes, they're not written. And that makes it so much harder for that new person to navigate that family because these rules are
Yeah.
unspoken. They are learned over generations, and they're
Hmm.
often unconscious. And so when you're getting into a new
Mm.
family, these rules might be anything from we don't talk about emotions to we don't share family secrets outside of this unit or even with each other. Or it could be something as innocuous as dad cuts the turkey on Thanksgiving and mom makes the pie, and that's how it is every year. We're not changing it. So
Right.
they can be silly, simple, not a big deal, but they can be really big things that you don't necessarily know how to plan for or even identify before you're really deep in the relationship and trying to figure out, okay, why am I not closer with this family than I expected to be at this point?
Oof. Yeah. So there it is,
Cool.
rubbing up against those expectations that people felt walking into it, you know.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I just am kind of marinating on what you said about how families integrating into families like learning a new language. I mean, like it really is.
It is.
Um and not only are you learning and establishing the relationship into that new unit, you're also doing that with your partner, which is huge in and of itself. So there's actually, I suppose using a very basic dyadic relationship structure in my head to keep it simple, at minimum, three different
Hmm.
areas where you're learning these new roles and rules and the languages essentially. And then so many families that come from remarried parents and things of that nature where it's an even wider web. Um, that's a lot. A lot.
Yeah, that is a lot. And I really liked what you said about like trying to establish your own rules with your partner at the same time. Because we
Hmm.
forget that that is complex in itself in the early years of a relationship. And so
Yeah.
doing that while also sort of pulling from and deciding what you don't want about your extended family dynamics can be really challenging.
Yeah. Well, and I just think about our specialty area of like couple relationships and attachment theory and stuff, and how it's like we're moving through these very real, challenging experiences in life. And we're needing to go like feel safe and secure with our person, with our secure base. And
Hmm.
if we've got that, they're not always seeing our best self. They're getting all the parts of us that want to kind of run and escape the discomfort of all this stuff, or get really big and, extroverted in all this stuff. And that's just a lot. And I imagine that's where you see some couples coming in to see you. They've kind of hit this wall where there's just too much of this reactivity going on around these very normal, but like challenging, stressful dynamics.
Yeah, Liz, we could have an entirely separate podcast about just how attachment plays a role in these conversations. I feel like what we're
Yeah.
talking about today is sort of like looking at what happens at a high level, and then attachment is really this like deep root beneath all of this. So I'm
Yeah.
glad you brought that up, and maybe we'll do another podcast where we just talk
Pause
about
that. We're going
that.
to, yeah.
Yeah,
Episode
exactly.
number 2, I already feel it coming. But in all
Yes.
seriousness, it's a very relevant subject to explore because and as I hear it coming from you, there's some way deeper themes playing out in all this. And those are worth exploring too. So, but yeah, so every person brings this invisible thread of loyalty to their family of origin. How do
Mhm.
you see those loyalties show up in a couple's relationship, especially when partners maybe have different ideas about what it means to honor their own family while protecting their relationship?
Yeah, so family loyalty plays a huge role in all of this. And I think it starts off subconscious and then it can potentially turn into what the fight almost becomes about. So even among the
Yeah.
best communicators, couples can get stuck in this feeling of, okay, if I agree with my partner about X, Y, and Z about my family, that's basically me betraying my family. So there's this initial
Mm-hmm.
hurdle to get over of being able to pinpoint things or point out things that might not be so great about your family, or maybe you would do differently. It initially feels like you are completely betraying them. And this is understandable because a lot of people grow up with this sort of family first mentality. And
Yeah.
there's just sort of this dynamic of we're not going to question or challenge the way that we are. So it feels like this betrayal to even entertain the idea of viewing your family, again, your rules, your roles, your values, all of that stuff in a different way. So what happens when that comes up for people is that when they have these conversations, that partner who the conversations about their family, they might feel
Yeah.
defensive, they might feel like shutting down. Um, and so it's so important for that partner who is bringing this to them to keep it about themselves and not necessarily
Mm-hmm.
about
Mm-hmm.
their partner's family. So it's, hey, I'm having a hard time with this, not, I really just don't like the way your dad does X, Y, and Z. Because the only reaction that that person can have to that, especially if they're subconsciously worried about that loyalty, is, well, he's always been like that and he'll never change. And also kind of like, what do you want me to do about it?
Yeah, and that's a fascinating thing you're honing in on because using an extreme example of maybe a parent that is like unhealthy or very difficult or, like narcissistic or something like that, it can seem confusing for a partner to maybe experience their partner, the child of that person, like kind of protecting them or like even sustaining some sort of loyalty. I'm just
Yeah.
thinking of that as kind of a random example. There's just so many ways these dynamics can show up and really put the defenses up. But again, I hear you saying like there's a way to navigate like each and every one of these things. And it sounds like a lot of it starts with communicating in a way that helps your partner stay like a little more softened to just talking about it.
Yeah. And communicating in a way that they can do something about it, because what you're really asking
Mm-hmm.
for in that situation is usually just to be heard and feel like your partner sees what you're going through and cares about what you're going through. So if you make it
Yeah.
about you, you're more likely to get that response. If you make it about them, then you're more likely to get some defensiveness, which is really not going to make you feel super cared for. And your partner's not feeling great about it either.
Mm-hmm. That's so true.
Mhm.
How do you feel like some of these challenges can end up impacting a couple's relationship?
Yeah, so I find that it can end up becoming a pretty serious issue with some couples. So sometimes it's just sort of, these kind of like annoying conversations. They don't really go anywhere, but it doesn't become this big festering problem. But for some couples, they can find themselves sort of stuck in this never-ending conflict about their grievances with their in-laws. And the place where they often find themselves getting stuck is one has the stance of, you never stand up for me and you care about your family more than you care about me. That's sort of the underlying meaning they make of being stuck in this. And then the other partner might be stuck in a stance of, there's nothing I can do to fix this, and you're asking me to give up my family, which you can see the underlying meaning of both of those are just impossible. That is just a terrible place for either of them to be in. And so it can feel like this huge deal that if one finds, something irritating about their in-laws and they bring it up, the other doesn't really receive it. And the other feels like them bringing it up is sort of this loyalty test or being asked to choose their partner over their family. Neither of them is really in a great position in that case. So I think in the worst of these conflicts, that's what it ends up becoming about.
Well, and I think play that out even more. That's when you find couples really sitting in that murky space of, we're just not meant to be together.
Oof.
And really chalk it up to the difficulty of those dynamics. And I don't know if you're going to take us there, but I'm definitely interested to hear what you say about that. Like, how can a couple go from being in that sort of place to a better place?
Yeah, I mean, the are we really meant to be together place is a really tough place. And I would say if they're feeling that way about this situation with their in-laws, they're probably having a similar cycle, a similar conflict going on with a lot of other things in their relationship. And that's not to say they have a bad relationship or they're dysfunctional or there's anything like that going on, but clearly they're stuck in a place where these conversations can't be had in a way for either of them to feel like they're hearing each other. And it just feels like an endless pit against each other.
Wow, you just did what I wasn't even thinking you would do, but I'm like, it's the truth. It's like you're identifying that's a stuck cycle.
Yeah.
And like, that's kind of what a therapist like you knows to work with. So it, again, reminds me there's actually a lot of hope for people that are sitting in that kind of space,
Yeah.
Yeah, because those cycles can become like little twisters, and you just feel so caught up in it. You don't know how you're ever going to get out. But a lot of possibility exists, right?
Absolutely.
So I know like setting boundaries with family can also trigger deep feelings of betrayal, like especially if a lot of loyalty was a core value growing up. And I thought about when you were talking about loyalties, some of that's unspoken, some of it's literally spoken,
Yeah.
And I think culture can play such a huge role too for people's varying experiences around that concept of family loyalty. So it's just so huge. But how do you guide couples to navigate the boundary setting in a way that maybe honors their partnership without severing meaningful family ties?
Yeah. So boundary setting is really important. I would say there's sort of a watch out with boundary setting related to what we were just talking about with being in that stuck place. So first I'll say boundary setting can be a great thing, right? It's coming together, communicating about what you are and are not okay with as a unit and for your relationship, for your inner family. And doing this in a way that is respectful to each of your feelings about your broader family and also to your broader family is great and really important. So it can be such a great thing. What I will say is that when you are already in that stuck place in your relationship where you really find yourself not being able to navigate these conversations in a way that leads to a sense of resolution and repair, then boundary setting can be a really difficult thing to navigate. So I think that the intention behind boundary setting is really important for both partners to align on beforehand. And what I mean by that is that they both need to be in a place where they are really trusting of knowing what each other's intentions are when setting those boundaries, and that those intentions are truly about setting boundaries in the best interest of their relationship rather than as a way to kind of like win this argument or make a statement to their in-laws or teach a lesson or any of those kind of scary things that it might feel like when you two are in a place where you feel like you can't really get to a resolution about this. So again, if you're Yeah, if you're stuck in that place, with regards to navigating these dynamics where one partner feels like the other one's never standing up for them and one feels like they're being put through a loyalty test, boundary setting might end up feeling kind of like a scorecard rather than a healthy solution.
Mm. Ooh.
Yeah,
Well,
just to watch out.
I definitely encourage people listening to like take that in and think about it. Cause I don't know, I'm assuming 99.9% of the people listening right now are just as human as me and you. And we get this wrong sometimes because it's like
Definitely.
all those strategies you described that like needing to be right, getting defensive, having to like be the one that comes out winning the interaction or whatever. They're all just protective measures we take, when we're feeling some deeper sense of anxiety or fear or a threat, external threat coming in. And we have to remember like our person is not our enemy. We're standing on the same side. And I don't know, sometimes the visualization with that helps me. But that sticks out, that piece of a scorecard. Because you work with a lot of like successful, high achieving clients, right? And they still get stuck in these kinds of dynamics too. In fact, I wonder what people are so good at in their life with their jobs and stuff, maybe even fuels that part of them that just knows how to come out big front and center and like win the thing, even when it's with their partner.
Yeah, well, that's a really tough place to be in where you feel like the most important thing is sort of winning the fight and being right instead of uh, doing what's right for your relationship, which doesn't involve either of you winning necessarily. So, like you said, that protective part can kind of move you in that direction. And we got to have a lot of compassion for that. It's a protective part for a reason, but also just be aware of it, right? Because there's some ways that it might be rearing its head that's actually very hurtful for the relationship unintentionally.
Yeah, 100%. So, Katie, what are some ways that couples could work together rather than turn against each other when it comes to these family dynamics?
Yeah, so thanks for asking that. And I will say that this is so much easier said than done. But if we're going to kind of take some high level recommendations away, if you're not too deep and stuck in this cycle, these are some easy ways to navigate these conversations. So, first is
Yeah,
to
let's
remember
do
to
it.
keep it about you and your partner, not about your in laws. And I know I brought that up a lot, but the important thing to remember in that is that you really can't control other people. You can only control how you two navigate them together. So that one's a big one. The second, I would say, try to show empathy for each other's positions. So one partner is new to navigating this family dynamic. In fact, you're both new to navigating each other's family dynamics. And the other is learning or seeing a new perspective about their family for the first time, maybe ever in their whole life. So that's a difficult position for both of them to be in. You're both sort of learning together. And an add on to that is that this stuff takes a long time to figure out. So you're seeing your family in a new light for the first time, and the other is sort of figuring out what they want their family unit to look like, what you both want your family unit to look like together. This stuff definitely does not happen overnight. So have some patience with it. It's gonna take a bit. And then the final one, and I would say this is probably with any big challenging conversation, is to approach these conversations with compassion, curiosity, try not to be judgmental, try to really understand each other's stance on it, and just give yourselves some grace in this process because it's rarely ever perfect and it's a tough one for everyone. So try to remember that and just
Yeah,
give yourselves grace where you can.
that's great. I think I read one time a long time ago, like one of the greatest danger zones you can like find yourself in is when you're thinking that you know everything there is to know about your partner.
Mm.
And that's like such a curiosity killer.
Yeah.
And that word really sticks out to me. I'm wondering, can you maybe say a little more about what you mean by curiosity? Like, because people do get so close to their partner and you know each other so deeply well. For those people that feel like, but I do know my partner like 1,000%. How can they still maintain like this practice of curiosity? And like, why would they want to?
Oh gosh. Well, I just pictured an iceberg when you said that. I mean, you might know your partner
Yeah.
so well, but think about all that is underneath the surface with regards to their family, intergenerational dynamics, like their entire family's history that led to them being them and their family being their family. Inevitably, there's so much there that even your partner isn't 100% aware of, hasn't consciously processed. And so
Mm,
realizing that in itself helps to sort of like lower the judgment level. Like being curious allows you to have a conversation about it and sort of explore it together rather than assuming that your partner even really knows what you're talking about or what's going on or what you're pointing out. So it really is it's a
yeah.
journey. You're exploring what family dynamics mean to both of you together at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know if you do this either, and share if you want, but you don't have to. It's like reverse curiosity. It's like I've learned over the years and through being a therapist, like to sometimes actually go to my husband to ask him for feedback about me.
Ah,
It's like, give me the thought, like, I'm curious about this about myself. Like, what do you see about this? And kind of inviting his curiosity to respond to what I want to learn about myself or understand about myself. And when you get to a place like that, boy, you sure do learn things about yourself.
yes, 100%. And I love that. And I have done that with my husband too. And there really is so much to gain. It's interesting to see how they perceive you. And again, this is something where
Yeah.
you can't totally assume you know how they feel about you in all ways, but especially your family, right? So
Yeah.
kind of like
Yeah.
taking yourself out of the perspective you've always been in with your family and trying to look at it from your partner's perspective might help you to learn something new and just help you understand each other in that dynamic more.
Gosh, that's so true. So true. And you know what I was thinking about too, just regarding like boundaries and everything, like, and thinking that certain things about each other and whatever is change, like even with established boundaries and needs and stuff like that, like we still change over time. And so, like, you might make certain agreements or arrangements or boundary practices with your partner, with in laws and family. And those things may actually change over time. And I'm wondering, like, what do you think are maybe some of those signs that people would experience that indicate, like, yeah, we did establish this one thing, but like maybe this need is changing for us?
Yeah, I think that's really important to point out that this is evolving always. And I
Good.
think that also takes some of the pressure off of some of these initial conversations about expectations and boundaries, because sometimes it can feel like this is a binding contract that we're establishing right now. Like we are always going to
Mm-hmm.
have this boundary with my family or your family. And that's
Yeah.
just a serious thing to feel like you're entering into. So it is so important to just keep that perspective in mind that it is an evolving process. And I wouldn't say, I don't know if there's something that like stands out to me of like a specific point in time when couples are like, okay, it's time to change the boundary now.
Yeah.
I think that's going to vary for every couple, but even just being aware that, yeah, you can check in on it and it's going to evolve is a really helpful tool.
Right. Gosh, it'd be so much easier if it was just like something that hit you in the face.
It's time now to
Like,
change
hey,
this
that
boundary.
boundary came and knocking. We need to talk.
Yeah, if only we could
You're
get those
right.
signs.
I know, right? So what do you feel like it looks like when a couple goes from just surviving through these things to really thriving together?
Yeah. So what it will look different in terms of the behavior changes is that even though your in-laws will continue to have their quirks, which they will, this isn't going to result in feeling like a wedge is being driven between you and your partner. And a big way of knowing that that is the case is seeing that you can laugh about this stuff together. Um, and I think that's so important because this is a huge sign of success. It means that both of them can safely and successfully and also respectfully acknowledge the absurdity of their families without it meaning that they're admitting defeat or being critical or betraying their own family and just being able to laugh
Mhm.
about it. And really, what that shows is that they can they can trust that they're in it together for the long run and that no one's being asked to choose sides. So that's what it'll look like. And what it's going to feel like is like you're on the same team, but it's not a team against your families. No one is winning or losing anymore. You're just figuring out how to be together in this in a way that feels good and safe for both parties.
Ah, that sounds lovely. I
Isn't
love
that nice?
that. Yeah, and I mean, I really do. I love that you can kind of paint that picture just eloquently like that, because I imagine you've seen that too. You've seen people really shift into that space together and can really recognize the difference. And they do too, because they're feeling what you've described.
Yeah, and what a relief it is, because this stuff's going to happen. There's going to be things that come up that kind of rub you both the wrong way, right? It might not always feel great in the dynamic, but if you can trust that your partner cares about what you're going through, that they have your back, I mean, that's just such a relief. And that's everything. That really is, what we're all striving for when we navigate these situations as a couple.
I love that. Katie, thank you so much. Is there any last tidbit you would share with our listeners, or if people are listening and they have kind of been going through a lot related to in-laws and extended family and just the merging of all those relationships, what would you say to those individuals listening that maybe have really gotten something from this today?
I would just say that know that you are not alone. This is such a common challenge that people go through. It's really complex. It's okay that it's feeling hard. Like we said at the beginning, there's this expectation sometimes for things to be perfect. And if they're not, that it means that everything is bad. It's okay that it's not always great. So I would just say, keep working on it together and focus on each other and how you two get through it as a unit rather than how you expect to change anyone else.
Oh, yeah. And on that mic drop, Katie, thank you for talking this out with us. This is actually so great. I'm excited for people to hear what you've had to say about this and really appreciate you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. This was a lot of fun.
It really was. And for those listening, if you want to learn more about Katie, you can read her bio. You can meet with her in Dallas or online in Texas. And we'll post a link to her bio page in the show notes. So definitely check her out and learn more about what it's like to work with her. Thanks again, Katie.
Thanks, Liz. Bye.